Will do, Mr. Chairman. Representative Kinner,
Here.
Representative Larson,
Here.
Representative Schwartz,
Here.
Representative Simpson,
Here.
Representative Stiff,
Here.
Representative Walters,
Here.
and Chairman Nicholas.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, we have a re-referral, is that correct, on 241?
241, 205, 207, Mr. Chairman.
So let's go to 241. Is there? This is basically, it's here just because it raises fees, it looks to me like.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. We got Chairman Burkhart here. Come out of his committee.
Okay, please proceed, Don.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, 241 was referred to appropriations due to the money in the bill. And the bill involves fees for change in fees for oversized and overweight vehicles. There was a standing committee amendment to that that changes the amounts indicated in the bill itself. And I can go through those individually if you wish. But in the interest of time, what it did was took the existing fees and increased all of the existing fees by 50%. And some of those fees, Mr. Chairman, have not been increased since 1993. So it was to bring fees up to current standards with overweight and oversized vehicles. And that's the bill in a nutshell. I can go into detail if you would like, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman. Chairman Burkhart, if you would, for me, the way I was reading this, is this for all oversized, overweight, or are these for trucks that don't have their own authority coming into the state and going through the state, or is it all encompassing? I couldn't quite gather that.
Mr. Chairman, it would be for all oversized, overweight loads in the state, whether they originate here or come into the state.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So do we have numbers on how many vehicles we're talking about?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have numbers on how many vehicles. I can give you numbers on current revenue from these. And the two big ones would be under 3118 804 F and G. And the current revenue from F is 3.4 million and from G is 5.5 million. Mr. Chairman, Representative Schwartz, could you repeat your question, please? These petitions.
F was 3.4 million, G was?
Oh, I'm sorry. G is 5.5 million currently.
Thank
So
you.
in effect, these would raise it approximately 50%.
Do we know what the rough amount of income this will bring? And these dollars go to YDOT?
Mr. Chairman, these dollars would go directly to YDOT to their highway funds. And the current estimate is somewhere near, I'm going to round it off and say $13 million, up from 10.3 million.
Okay, questions for the bringer?
Motion do pass.
Motion do pass. Any further discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none. Close public comment. Moved by Representative Larson, seconded by Representative Walters. Roll call, please. Ryan?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee are voting on House Bill 241. Representative Kinner,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Schwartz, Representative Simpson,
Aye.
Representative Stiff,
Aye.
Representative Walters,
Aye.
and Mr. Chairman.
Aye. Okay, thank you for bringing the bill to us.
Mr. Chairman, do you want to hold 258 until, or 254 until a little later? Or do
No,
you
let's
want
do it
to
right now. Let's just do it as a, get it kicked out. Otherwise, it'll be forever.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission.
Go ahead.
What you have in front of you members of the committee, is the proposed amendment that was mostly conceptual the last time you considered this bill and looked at it. And I'll walk through the amendment. I think you remember the bill is to fund the YDOT computer system. In the amendment, there were two past amendments generated by the committee, page 10, line 3, and page 10, lines 10 through 16. They were amended by the committee and passed by the committee. The rest was a conceptual amendment on how the replacement of the computer system should be undertaken. And I'll walk through the amendment. I'm on page 1, line 18, section 4 is an entirely new section. What this section does is requires the department to work in conjunction with the University of Wyoming Computer Sciences Department and ETS in the purchase and development of the computer system, the migration, the implementation. Mr. Chairman, do people need copies of it? I laid a copy on each desk. Okay. So, and it requires a collaborative effort between the agency, the university, and ETS on this project, so that you have an efficient information exchange among all parties, that hopefully we'll get the best possible price, and that the system complies with national standards in this area and standards for cybersecurity. And that's right at the top of page 2, lines 1 through 14. And that it's also hosted in the most efficient manner, is continually evolved. And that's part of the problem we have right now, is that this current system was never evolved and was allowed to just collect dust in effect through time when technology changed. Also to include public and private partners who access the system for their input. And again, include our legal minds so that we do, in effect, the right and legal thing. And there is a committee established. I'm on line 29, page 2, to provide input, oversight, that sort of thing on this change in the computer system. Includes 2 members from ETS, 2 members from the Joint Transportation Committee, 2 members from the Joint Appropriations Committee, 2 members from the university, 2 members from the Department of Transportation, and 2 members from entities that will exchange data with the information system. And is also to receive product demonstrations from vendors and that. Line 12, page 3, not later than July 1st of this year. There'll be a timeline for this project. Anticipate full configuration, migration, implementation, and closeout of the project no later than July 1, 2027. And that's at the direction of the committee on that timeline. Committee, I had originally 5 years, the committee added a year, figuring that was a more realistic number. There's a required report to Joint Transportation and Joint Appropriations after July 1 of each year, and it specifies what the report is to include. And then they will develop line 38, page 3, Department of Transportation and the other entities develop a reimbursement schedule for consulting services provided in that. And it goes over to section 5, which is merely the implementation effective July 1st, 2021, except those sections that require work beforehand. And Mr. Chairman, that's the overall gist of the conceptual amendment as prepared by LSO.
And so, committee, remember that this is a computer system that is estimated currently to be an $80 million computer system. It will cost anywhere between $1.5 to $2 million at a minimum to operate over its lifespan. Yeah, annually. And so with those type of figures and with the incredibly changing world of computer technology, this committee basically, and it's similar, by the way, that the judiciary did this, Supreme Court, when they were doing their system. And I just think that to have ETS and UW having their best and the brightest on their computer folks work through with what YDOT and ensure the interoperability between that agency and other agencies, and to ensure state-of-the-art work for that type of a price tag, that this is a wise way to go. It's kind of like having legislators on capital construction projects. It's an ongoing oversight to get to where we need to go to maximize our dollar. So I just think it was a great concept, and so I kind of worked through this a few times with 2 or 3 iterations of this amendment, but be happy to answer any questions about it. Any public comment on the amendment?
Chairman Nicholas, nobody has raised their hand in the virtual room, but I do have Director Reiner and a number of other YDOT personnel available if you need.
And so I'm not sure that the director has seen the amendment, Ryan. So could you just make sure that the copy of this amendment gets to his office ASAP? And if they do have comments on it, that they can make them available to us and to Dawn as quick as possible so we could do floor amendments if necessary.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I did send it to YDOT's legislative liaison maybe about a half hour ago, but I'll make sure that Director Reiner gets a copy.
Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead, Don.
Mr. Chairman, just to be clear to the committee, this is a standing committee amendment that I've presented.
Okay. Okay. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. We have a motion on the bill as amended, or actually just on the amendment. All those
Move the
in favor
amendment?
say- Yeah, on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. Back on the bill. Any further discussion on the bill?
Question on the bill?
Question called on the bill. Roll call, please, as amended.
Mr. Chairman, you're voting on House Bill 254 as amended. Representative Kinner,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Schwartz, Representative Simpson,
No.
Representative Stiff,
Aye.
Representative Walters,
Aye.
Chairman Nicholas.
Aye. Okay, next we have two. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, if we could just make sure that Chairman Burkhart's ready to handle the amendment as well. as the
Yeah.
bill.
Mr. Chairman, I would be glad to handle the amendment on the floor. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to 205. This is a re-referral, Select Committee on Extractive Industry Transitions.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
Please proceed.
So this is, and I assume you all have the amendment in front of you. So there's some fairly substantial changes from as a standing committee amendment, which changes the appropriation to a total of $18,500. The amendment essentially changes it from a select committee to a subcommittee of the Standing Minerals Committee. So it would be 2 members of the Senate, 3 members of the House Committee jointly to look at those communities that are most impacted by coal closures, by downturns in our extractive industries, and how we can best help those. And so the appropriation requested is to cover per diem for those folks that are serving on those committees, because the idea is to get those committees into those communities to visit with stakeholders in each of those really severely impacted communities. And so that's where the appropriation comes in.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
and Representative Banks, we scrambled down, we're short on staff, and we grabbed the bills. We did not have the amendment. And so Mr. Chairman, if I can, I just want to make sure, because the original bill creates a task force that you were going to fund to do these things. Can coming through the Minerals Committee, that was changed, and it becomes a subcommittee under the direction of the Chairman of Minerals with the on the Senate and House side. Are the members then in the amendment appointed as members of the Minerals Committee on both the House and the Senate side? And then they proceed from there. Do I have that accurate?
Mr. Chairman. Yes, that's correct. So essentially, the president of the Senate will appoint 2 members from the existing Minerals Committee. Speaker of the House will appoint 3 members from the existing Minerals Committee. It also deletes the section with the governor appointment. So it's just the members of the House Standing Committee and Senate Standing Committee, correct?
So the appropriation goes down?
Correct. The appropriation does go down to 18,500. And that amount came from when the coal bankruptcy task force was created, sort of planned it on what that amount was coming from.
Okay, great. Any public comment on the re-referral? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, move the bill.
Moved by Representative Kenner, seconded by Representative Schwartz. Any further discussion?
So, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
This is a re-referral, so is that a due pass?
Do pass.
Move due pass.
Okay, roll call, please.
Chairman Nicholas, members of the committee, are voting on House Bill 205. Representative Kinner,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Schwartz, Representative Simpson,
Aye.
Representative Stiff,
Aye.
Representative Walters,
Aye.
Chairman Nicholas.
Aye.
7-0, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, next up is House Bill. Thanks. Good job, Mr. Banks. Representative Banks. House Bill 207, Coal-Fired Generation Facility Closures Litigation Fund. It looks like this is a $1.2 million appropriation from general fund to the governor's office, effective immediately.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
we did this in the budget to the tune of 1.25 versus 1.2. So I don't know that we can slow the progress of the bill, but I think we can take all the funding out.
So it's one-time funding for 1 year, and I'm curious that it's a bill, number one.
As I said, I don't think we can, because it's a re-referral, we can't do anything to the content of the bill other than the dollars, or have a do not pass, but a do not pass really doesn't do anything.
Or we could insert language that says that if the budget bill passes as prepared, then the budget dollars, it will be the budget dollar.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I'm wondering if Ryan knows if Representative Harrelson is online.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Kinner, I don't see him, Representative Haraldson, in the virtual waiting room. We do have at least one member of the public who wishes to comment.
So we have several ways we can do it. We can either take the money out. We can pass it out and ask the Senate to, well, no, the Senate, that's done. That's already in the both sides. Isn't that correct? All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
So the money we have right now, the 1.25 in the governor's office, is for coal port litigation on the lawsuit we have with Montana against being able to transport interstate coal. This, as I look at it, is for export of Wyoming coal or the continued operation of coal-fired electric generation facilities. And so I'm wondering, is this in addition to what we have for, because I don't think we can expand that we have in the budget for continued operations, or am I seeing that wrong? I would suggest that it's different.
I don't think so. I think he had a different intent. So what I suggest we do is, number one, the Attorney General's office can do this. And the idea that we need to spend 1.2 million on lawyers when we're already spending them on, with the current litigation, because we're tag teaming with Montana and one other state. It was just kind of a joint determination to use independent counsel. But we're not spending near as much as in there that we have assigned to it. And it makes it, for this type of litigation, I think the AG can do it professionally and responsibly. So I would suggest that we do is simply reduce the amount to a number that we're much more comfortable with. And then that means we'll have to get up on the floor and argue our number. And we'll have this discussion on the floor, and we may win, we may lose, but that will just be our position. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to, on section 2, page 4, line 10, reduce 1.2 million to 100,000.
Is there a second?
I'm looking at the standing committee amendment. Let me track it.
Oh,
Sorry.
All right.
where, I don't. Hey, Mr. Chairman, can we comment on this bill while we're waiting for Representative Walters?
Yes.
I'm rather amazed by the language. This is a much broader concept than what we're dealing with the money that was in the governor's budget. I mean, this is basically saying that we're going to sue states that are promoting the use of renewable energy. That, to me, I mean, I can't support the bill at all. And I think the lawsuits would be, for lack of a better word, specious. I really would prefer my amendment to say $0, but I was being generous.
Mr. Chairman, if I might add something to the discussion.
Please do.
So, Mr. Chairman, I did not come prepared to talk on this particular bill, and I really don't know where Representative Haroldson is. But the gist of this bill was to fund litigation against states who say they don't want Wyoming energy that's produced by coal. It was kind of an interstate issue of that more than the coal port issue. And like I said, I didn't come prepared to speak in depth on the bill, but that was the gist of the bill. It is different than the coal port bill.
So yeah, and this refreshes my recollection, because he talked to the rep talked to me about it. Plus, he sent me litigation that's currently going on between North Dakota and Minnesota. And in that litigation, Minnesota passed a law that said that basically restricting taking that energy, electricity, that's generated by either natural gas or coal, because it's not green enough. They passed a law in Minnesota that says that you can't use it. Well, so there's an interstate, basically commerce issue on whether or not you can do that. And so the suggestion is that Colorado is in the process of doing the same thing for Black Hills Energy, suggesting that we can't ship coal produced or even potentially even natural gas produced electricity down to, or that Colorado can't not take, our energy in essence. So that's the whole concept. Which is an interesting concept, actually, but there's still no reason the Attorney General can't do it. And why you would have private counsel do that makes no sense to me. Is it a good idea? I don't know. I think I think North Dakota won a summary judgment on it in a federal court, but then that's has been appealed up to the Court of Appeals. And I think it's pending right now. So the issue is, do we go, the real issue is, do we go outside counsel or not for such litigation? And so when this is explained to the floor, I'll bet you it'll pick up some support with the concept. So I think let's go back to then, I still think entertaining a motion to reduce the number of dollars is a good idea.
We have a motion on the floor, Mr. Chairman, of $100,000.
So we may need an expert witness, take depositions, do those types of things. So the question is, how much is that going to be? Well, within 1 year, it's not going to be more than $100,000. So that if they go do something and they start it, I think we can come back and fund additional more dollars.
I mean, I believe the bill references 2030 is the outlying date that this bill takes effect until. I know, I mean, my inclination was to give them $10, but like I said, I was feeling.
But they will have real costs.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I think if we keep the number down at the 100,000, even though it's workable for 1 year, I don't think it's going to fail on the floor. I think we need to have a stronger number in there for it to be successful on the floor.
250? That's probably.
Whatever the body thinks. I'm just saying, suggesting 100 would probably fail and we're back to the 1.2 million.
Yep. Although they don't understand the real issue. But Greer, I had this conversation with Greer, and Greer says, no, we don't want to use the AG. We want private counsel.
So let's vote on the sports amendment, Mr. Chairman. Was there a second?
Chairman Nicholas, this is Ryan. I apologize for the interruption. You do have one member of the public who has raised their hand who would like to comment. I don't know if now would be an appropriate time.
Sure. Let him in.
One moment, thanks.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Please introduce yourself and.
Great. Hi, my name is Shannon Anderson. I'm a staff attorney at Powder River Basin Resource Council, and we are opposed to the bill and especially opposed to the appropriation because as the conversation you've just been having, Mr. Chairman, we're doing this bill backwards. For the lawyers on the committee, you normally start with a claim and a cause of action, and then you figure out how you can fund your case. Here, we're doing the reverse. We don't know if there's a cause of action or how many causes of action, and we don't know how strong it would be, and if there is an even one to begin with. So instead, we're putting $1.2 million into a fund in case something comes up. And we believe it would be better to let the professional, already paid lawyers at the Attorney General's office that you've been talking about research potential actions, and then have them bring something forward to you. And if additional funding is needed for outside counsel or expenses, you can go from there. But the problem that you're having in your discussion is exactly the one that we believe is the problem with the bill, and that you don't know what the budget's going to be because you don't know what the case is. You don't know how long it's going to take and how much it will cost. We're also concerned about the transparency on spending and the checks and balances. We know from previous litigation that the state has done, it's really easy to run up billable hours and legal expenses without any paid back to the state. So what's the return on the $1.2 million? And what happens when the funds go dry? Will whatever litigation we have started end? We understand that there are reports due from the bill, but it will be hard to correct course if litigation is initiated. Again, we ask that you vote against the bill or at least the appropriation, and encourage the governor's office and the attorney general's office to come back when a case is ready so we can plan that out the right way instead of just giving them $1.2 million to see what happens. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also am familiar with the Minnesota North Dakota litigation and happy to answer any questions on that. There was an 8th Circuit decision. It was a split panel, various different concurrences on there. Again, it's an emerging topic of the law. It's an interesting one, but we don't know if we have a case. We don't know how much it will cost. And we just really encourage you to urge caution overall on the bill. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead.
Ms. Anderson, but in fairness, and let's just take away what the action is or what the intent of the bill is, but just in the point that you brought up, we're an appropriating process that happens every 12 months. And so it seems reasonable to me, regardless what the topic was, whether it's one you loved or whether it's one you hate, that if you were anticipating some sort of legal action, that you'd want to have resources there, financial resources there that you could draw upon if that situation arose in between sessions. Is that not fair?
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, that is exactly right. And I would argue that that funding is already there through our existing attorneys at the Attorney General's office. It's also there through things like the Federal Natural Resource Policy Account and other, funding pots of money that you all have allocated to our Attorney General's office and our governor to defend the state in litigation. That money is used every year. So it already exists. This is different. This is $1.2 million for a case that we do not know what it is. And so again, we just urge you to express caution and to really think that through. Is it 1.2 million? Is that the right number? And is it the right case? So thank you.
Okay, any other further questions? Seeing none, any other public comment?
That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead. Did he say no?
Yeah, that's all the public comment, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we'll close public comment. Back on the bill. We have a pending motion that has not been seconded. Is that correct? Do we have any other motions?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion of making that, reducing that from 1.2, whatever it is, to 500,000.
I would make a friendly motion to amend that amendment to 250,000. That's more than enough to get this thing off the ground.
Fair enough.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I agree. I think that's more than enough, but this is coal and we've seen the passion on the floor. I don't think that 250 is emotionally enough to move the bill and get past this amendment. I think that may take 500, even though you're suggesting it's too much for what's needed, just simply to stay away from the default of 1.2. But
Okay, we'll stick with 500. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No. That motion carries. Back on the bill. As amended, roll call.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, you're voting on House Bill 207 as amended. Representative Kinner.
Aye.
Representative Larson.
Aye.
Representative Schwartz. Representative Simpson.
Aye.
Representative Stith.
Aye.
Representative Walters.
Aye.
And Chairman Nicholas.
Aye. Okay, now we've got two bills, House Bill 219 and House Bill 244. We have amendments to both. So I'm looking for the 219 amendment. I think that, Ryan, do you have the amendment to 219?
I do, Mr. Chairman. Would you like me to email it to the committee?
Please.
Yeah, give me just one moment.
And also email it to the state treasurer. I think I got it from John Brody. I believe so. This is one that was prepared by John Brody, and I circulated it for everyone's comments, and then I approved it.
One we talked about this morning.
Yeah. Uh, I can't send the color. Can you send color?
You can get it in here, I'll get it once you send it.
Should be kicking it out, Lloyd.
Yeah. Oh, good job. So if everyone pulled out their 219. And I've got the handwritten version here somewhere.
And I have one there, Lloyd, for Treasurer Meyer.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You're very good at that.
It's my delicate petite hands.
I was going to say it was your large part.
So just to walk through the amendment, it's actually pretty simple. If you go to page 2, it deletes all of the stricken language and the new language. And so we go, but what that does is we go back to 7 members on the IFC and not 6. So that way, we're basically, and it's 6 appointed members plus the state treasurer. The state treasurer. And so then you go down and we add that on line 5, we add that term 5 to 6. Go ahead.
Are we getting the extra voting member? Just got to delete
It's
5.
it's a new appointment through the select committee process.
Increasing the size of the IFC. From 4 to 6.
Okay. I'm wondering whether I got the same draft that you guys are amending. My draft, Mr. Chairman, on page 2, line 2, you got reinsert all stricken language, delete all new language.
Yes,
So
we're
that's going
reinserting
back
the
to
7. Yeah.
I got you. Then over on
Then going down to
Lines,
line 5,
line 5.
that number goes
I
from
have,
5 to 6.
delete the 5 and insert 6. And so you got 6 members appointed by a selection panel. Now, if I recall, that selection panel process is that each one of the 5 elected officials have a person that that they put forth, or they can put forth to the selection panel as appointees. And then also,
Recommendations.
anybody can just put forth
Yeah,
any member at large, more or less.
as well as recommendations from the IFC.
Right, and recommendations from the IFC. So you're just moving that up to 6, so we got an odd number.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, there's a couple of things that I
Let's
wanted-
let's finish going through the whole
Okay,
the whole
all
bill.
right.
all right? So then the next change is on line 4, page 4, line 13. Through 20. Is that right? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, what page 4, lines 13 through 20, and then the new language does is it makes sure that the ex officio members are non-voting when it comes to voting on the benchmarks themselves. And the reason we're doing that is because we change who some of those ex officios are, because we bring in members of the House and the Senate, as well as the governor's liaison, or for lack of a better term, governor's liaison. And so those folks, just for the final vote on the benchmark, would not be a voting member. And the reason behind that, our thought was, especially with the legislative members, may not be as highly qualified as the other 7 members of the committee. 6 of them are coming from industry, and the treasurer would typically have some experience as well, whereas the legislators could be any of us who wouldn't be as highly qualified to, and we don't know what the qualifications of the governor's appointee might be. And so having them vote on the benchmark may not be the greatest idea, because the whole point is to use highly qualified folks in establishing that benchmark.
Yeah, and it's just following up on creating the independence of the IFC. And at any rate, they make their professional assessments of the benchmarks. And if they pass through the IFC, then they go and do what's happening tomorrow, which is a presentation of the benchmarks by your office to the SLIB board.
Yeah.
Okay, so that explains any other questions on the amendment? Representative Schwartz.
Well, it's curious, just that on page 2, we established the ex officios as non-voting members in the first place.
Right.
So I just don't know this is the best language we could use on page 4, because they're already established as non-voting members. Except, so the only one this would change.
I think we had that discussion. It's just a clarification to make sure.
Mr. Chairman, the discussion as we chewed on that bone a little while this morning is we didn't think that going back to the original language was clear enough that the ex officios could not be included, is all.
So now we'll take,
Yeah.
Kurt,
Mr.
just walk
Chairman.
us through your comments and
Yeah,
concerns.
and just a clarification, the reason why the ex officio members had to vote in the first place was because there were so many conflicts on the IFC that had to recuse themselves on the benchmarks. I had to recuse myself as state treasurer because I had employees. Both the CIOs had to recuse themselves. So just to get people to vote that weren't in conflict, we brought in the ex officios. So all of this bill does sort this out. This amendment, I think, in that regard is good. The one thing that I wanted to try to get done while this bill was in front of us is to kind of look back at some of the problems that we might be able to solve while this instrument is here. And one of the problems that we've had is that we really haven't done any significant upgrade of our accounting software since 1996. And I wanted to try to get some expertise in accounting and technology on the IFC. We got good general expertise because the requirements are, essentially that they have to have at least a $500,000 have put in place $500,000 of capital, and that's reasonable. But I was hoping that we could add to that definition that would say something like not more than 2 should have, at least ran a investment firm, had that operational or accounting experience. So that doesn't get necessarily lost in the weeds. And I had originally thought that one way to do it was to was to say that sixth member would have that experience. So the next one that we onboard would have that type of experience. So we have that in the conversation, somebody that actually has that background and experience. We can do it one or two ways. We can put it in the definition of the requirements to be an IFC member, or we can require that one person to have that. And so I would just, let you guys mull that around a little bit. And I look at it knowing that had the IFC been around in 96 and had we had somebody with that expertise on the IFC board, that we would have made different decisions, decades ago, and would have been in a position, to have a lot better system than we have today. So just trying to look at how we can inoculate ourselves against any future problems.
And I'm not sure that's, would fit. And it would have to be tailored language for one individual that in addition to everything else, he had that type of expertise. But typically those folks aren't really IT guys. They just would have experience with having those systems operable beneath them.
Yeah.
And I think there are a couple of IFC members that have that experience right now. They're at least their firms do.
I think they're generalists,
Overall.
and not experts.
But what we do address, Kurt, in 244 is that specifically that this study that will come out of the IFC will will evaluate your computer system, your needs, your IT needs, and make recommendations on what and who you should hire and be able to hire in order to bring in new systems and to have a staff capable of running those systems. So we get there on 244.
Well, that's just something for your guys' thought process. I'm all right. I'm glad that we're getting to an odd number, so it's actually a functional committee in that regard. I guess this is on the floor at this time, so I guess you can vote on that. I have a couple of other proposed amendments as we go through the bill.
Let's just go through everything that you've got.
Okay, over on page 3, I know that CLA had thought that their recommendation would be that the state treasurer should remain the chairman of the committee. I might surprise you in saying that I think that there's at least 1 year that the chairman should be somebody from the committee chairmanship. And what I think would probably be the best arrangement would be, I know it's important to get the committee involved, the members involved, so they have ownership and they can buy into the whole process. So looking at it from the standpoint of that the first year after the election, I believe that the chairman should come from the membership, and it shouldn't be the treasurer, because you get a new person elected that you want to have that continuity about what's going on. So I think it's really important to have that chairman be somebody from the member. And then I would say that every year thereafter, that it rotates back and forth, that the treasurer would be the chairman the next year. The year after that, the treasurer would not be the chair. That would be somebody from the membership. And essentially the reason for that is that I think it's important that the treasurer from time to time drive the bus, but he doesn't have to drive the bus all the time. I think it's important to get those members involved in the committee. We've spun up quite a few subcommittees to get them involved. And I think that most of the members are really buying in to that additional responsibility and enjoying it, and that keeps them more active and motivated. But I think that they should have the opportunity to also chair it and look at taking it in maybe a different direction that the chairman or the treasurer would go. So essentially, that's the amendment that I would wish you would entertain. And I think it brings the best of both worlds. Make sure that the treasurer has those responsibilities, but also realizes that there are times right after an election that it's probably better off having somebody that understands the role of the IFC, what the historical perspective has been, and essentially what the direction of the IFC was when the last treasurer left the office.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Treasurer Meyer, so I hear what you're saying, and I guess my question back to you would be then is if the treasurer is a member of the investment committee, he would be as eligible as any other member to be elected if they elected within their quorum who the chairman should be.
Well, Mr. Chairman, the language that I have is rotate to the treasurer annually and elected from membership excluding treasurer. So every other year you would exclude the treasurer. Pardon?
No, he's reading his proposal.
No, I'm reading my proposed.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm reading my proposed. So Mr. Larson or Representative Larson, I'm excluding the treasurer every other year, the first year after the election and the third year after the election.
Okay.
But, so read the language that you have one more time.
Okay, let's see. You leave the deletion there where it's at, and then you insert after committee annually at the first meeting of the committee after an election. The voting member shall elect from their number a chairman for one year. Thereafter, for chairmanship, the chairmanship shall rotate to the treasurer annually and elected from membership excluding treasurer.
Yes, so what you have is the treasurer gets it 1 year, and then they elect from their body for the other year.
Right, but the treasurer is always excluded the year after an election.
Okay,
So essentially, he has it 2 years, the second year and the year before the following election. But years 2 and 3, years 1 and 3 go to the membership.
go ahead.
Just for clarification, Mr. Treasurer, so the treasurer is excluded in the first year. Is the treasurer also excluded in the third year?
Yes, yeah. So we want to make sure, and I did say excluding the treasurer in the last, and maybe after chairman on page 6, you should say excluding the treasurer. And so you'd have the excluded, so it's clear that it was excluding the treasurer in the first year and then excluding the treasurer like every other year thereafter.
Go ahead.
So Treasurer Meyer, your logic on excluding that the year after election makes sense to me particularly if you had if you had a treasurer being reelected. But why, help me understand why you feel it's essential to have him be the chairman on those other 2 years?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think it's essential for the treasurer to be the chairman on those other 2 years, essentially because it's historically, constitutionally, and he's always been, or he or she, that office has always been, related and, taking the fiduciary responsibility of investing. Now, you guys can change that at any time, but I still think it's important for the treasurer to be in those roles, because you need somebody with oversight of the process. And that's oversight that's going to be, on the job every day throughout the year, that can actually have that perspective and give some guidance in some different areas. And so, that is primarily the reason for that.
So follow up, Mr. Chairman, but the opportunity would be, there's nothing that would exclude him from being elected on those years, those years. I'm struggling a little bit with that, but then you said something that caught my attention. So do you feel that there's something in if we went to this process that said the IFC would elect a chairman in there, are you thinking we're doing anything there that's bumping up against Constitution issues?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't believe that you are bumping up against any constitutional issues, except for essentially the historical role of the treasurer and the separation within the top 5 elected officials of duties, because you necessarily you try to keep those things separate that the top 5 elected officials have to deal with. You don't want to necessarily put everything into the executive branch, because if you do that, then they kind of lose accountability from the standpoint that the executive branch deals with 100 different topics, where the state treasurer necessarily just primarily deals with investments. And so you have that accountability going back to the oversight. And you necessarily don't have that going into the executive branch, because essentially, if they do a good job in one area, that may overshadow a poor job in another area, and there's no accountability.
So, Mr. Chairman, a follow-up again is as I've looked at this and I've studied it, the question that comes to my mind is that we've made a real shift in the last 4 years on investments coming out of the treasurer's office, and trying to give that office and do more of our overall investing out of the office instead of having managers. And so to my mind, I think that's kind of changed that oversight a little more and has placed a little more accountability. And I think, and with due respect to you, Treasurer Meyer, not everybody's going to be a Treasurer Meyer that's elected. All you have to do is get more votes than the next guy. And we see that. And so as we bring more of that in there, we could very well in the future have a situation where somebody doesn't have the legislative experience that you had, or experience in the treasurer's office that you had, but yet we will still require him to be chairman of that investment committee. And I think that I think that causes me a little pause to reflect and say, we need to protect this moving forward to ensure that we're stable in that overall concept of doing more investment here within the office and do that. Am I making any sense there, or does that not ring right with you?
Well, Representative Larson, I think that we have a lot of checks and balances already within statute, as far as, I guess, reining in the day-to-day authority of the treasurer. And essentially, I think if you have someone that doesn't have the background or the acumen that were to be treasurer in the future, that you've got the balance of 6 other people on the IFC committee to, balance that out.
Mr. Chairman, and I agree. I completely agree with that. And so that those other 7 with that treasurer would vote to then determine who the chairman would want to be, would seem a logical check and balance in that whole process, I guess, is my point, Mr. Treasurer.
And I understand that. I don't know exactly why the CLA assessment said that the treasurer should be chairman of that at every time. You know, I look at it from a standpoint that I know there's times when, and purposes for the treasurer not to be that. And so I guess my amendment essentially guarantees that there will be that access to the other members rather than the treasurer. But it also guarantees that the treasurer who has accountability also has access to the chairmanship. So I think what I'm hoping to do is to institute and put in place the subcommittees and make that a matter of policy. So we have that, I guess, that framework to move forward, and that no matter who the treasurer is, he or she would come in with that policy in place. And one of my goals, and it has been since I got the job, full well recognizing that we need to make sure that no matter who comes in behind me, or whoever the treasurer could be in the future, that we have those checks and balances within the state treasurer's office. But we also have the ability of that person, if they are an exceptional person, to make a difference while they're in the office. And also you have at least enough authority to know that there is some accountability, that essentially the office isn't a paper tiger, so to speak.
Other questions for the treasurer? Okay, other amendments?
Let's see. No, Mr. Chairman, I think those were the only two that I had. I welcome the other, both members of the legislature. I think that's a good move. Having been on the WRS board as a liaison for more years than they keep records on who the liaisons are. It was one of the jobs that I enjoyed very much and learned a heck of a lot. And Mr. Chairman, I know you were a liaison. I think Representative Schwartz is also a liaison, and you learn a lot in that process. And we welcome the opportunity to deal with both sides of the Capitol.
Okay, so let's just do a quick summary of what the bill does with this amendment. And then we'll, before we do that, Ryan, do we have any public comment?
Mr. Chairman, no, you don't.
Okay. So I just want to walk everyone through this bill so we all understand it and where we're going. So with the amendment, the IFC will go to 7 members, 6 of whom are appointed by the select committee, the panel that is set up by statute. And so the purpose of that panel is a double blind, so that we have experts picking experts. And so it's just one more example of depoliticalizing the process. And then we add a Senate participant. And really the reason for adding a senator is so that we have 2 liaisons, 2 ex officio members who attend, there's at least quarterly meetings. But I think it's very important to have both bodies have at least one person who understands what is going on, because these folks are making recommendations on how we expend and invest $23 billion. And so we need the ability of both bodies to be able to have someone articulate the value and how this committee operates and transpires, and further educate them on just our investments in general. Representative Schwartz.
So, Mr. Chairman, will we want those liaisons to be reporting to CapFin on an annual basis?
Well, I don't know if they need to report. It probably has a value, but CapFin can ask them to report. So then then what we do also then, there are other ex officio members. We take the chief investment officer, so that's Patrick Fleming in this case, and we take the chief investment officer of the retirement. Currently, they're voting members. This makes them non-voting members, ex officio members. And the reason for that, again, is to depoliticalize this process. Because number one, they're both state employees. They are beholding, in a sense, both to the treasurer and really what their job is to go educate the IFC for what they do and what they want to do, and then have that the IFC, the disinterested professionals, making recommendations and advising and basically saying, yeah, you're doing a good job or you're not doing a good job, and here's how you could better improve your job, kind of like a chairman of the board to the CFO. And so it would make sense that that person who's going to the committee to get recommendations isn't a member of that committee and voting on his own actions. So it's just a logical, sequential separation of powers and authority. And I think it diffuses to some degree the relationship. So it lines out the relationships between the state and this independent board that is reviewing these actions. So then that takes us through page 2. So let's talk about the changes of making the treasurer still allowed him to be the chairman, but but the chairman is selected by the board. So what's the rationale for doing that? Well, the rationale is I think very simple. If you have a strong treasurer, that treasurer can control the issues and the topics and the functionality of the board of the IFC. And I would submit that that's not really the function of the treasurer as he is embedded into this program. These gentlemen or ladies who are experts, their job is basically to advise the treasurer on what best practices are on in the investment world. So the treasurer then can go back and then implement those, hopefully, if he's capable to do it, and if he has the authority, if he has the funds to do it. But in essence, they're there to advise the treasurer. And so to have the treasurer then be voting or automatically a chairman all the time, I think, once again, it kind of overlaps the responsibilities of the treasurer and his relationship with this advisory board that's supposed to be explaining and informing and educating the treasurer on how to do the overall investing of the process. In reality, to have full separation, it would, one of the options we considered is having the treasurer an ex officio member and not even a voting member. Because when you're voting on benchmarks, the treasurer doesn't have the qualifications of these individuals. And so it doesn't have the sophisticated long-term, investing 500 million, billions of dollars on a regular basis and on a continuous operation. On the other hand, this is state government. The treasurer has been the figurehead of the investments funds since the day when we actually started doing that, going back in the 70s, basically. Although up until the 90s, it was basically just bonds and stocks. No stocks at all. It was just and that type of thing. But I think that Kurt has a point that if nothing less, he ought to be the honorary chairman and basically have the dignity and the position that behooves him. So this was kind of a compromise so that if this committee wanted the treasurer to be chairman so Kurt would go and say, I'd like to be chairman and here's what I'm going to do and this is how I'm going to operate it. And I think that I'm the best for the job and I've got more time to spend on it, and they vote him in, then he votes in. And so that's the way the language is the way it is. And it's also in courtesy to the treasurer and part of what he wants. The other thing that this does, it takes the, I think that's about, those are the main changes. Did I miss anything? So, and Kurt, obviously you'll have your chance when this bill gets over to the Senate Appropriations to work your magic. And so we'll probably see your amendment back again, I would imagine, but please go ahead.
Yeah, and Treasurer Meyer, I appreciated the conversation. I don't know that I bought into the rationale on that 2 years. I think that the treasurer needs to be included in that process of being selected as the chairman. So I just looking over that hill and saying, I think, and I think that you made some really important comments for me to chew on making sure that he's included in that process. But thank you for that discussion because that cleared a lot of things up for me.
Well, and what we have done with House Bill 244 is basically we've just slowed this bus down a lot, and primarily as an accommodation to the treasurer, because we need to walk before we run. We want to see how these things function, and get the best advice we can, and review and have open public discussion on these issues, and have Kurt have your opportunity to have discussions with legislators, with the executive branch, and with the IFC members as well, to turn this in, to have the IMC function as adroitly, to have our investment team be first of class in the future, and be properly funded, and do all those things. So we're trying to do this with you and work with you as we go through this. So we appreciate your comments.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm perplexed by your comment that basically said that you would enjoy a weak treasurer rather than a strong treasurer in the job. To me, that really is, I guess, kind of disconcerting in a way.
Well, the question is separating responsibilities and having you can be the strongest treasurer in the world and have amazing influence on the investment team and on the IFC without even being a member. If you're a strong treasurer, this is setting up the processes of you having basically effectuating the CLA reports and also the IFC's data in response to us, that there needs to be a separation between politics and in investing. And frankly, I think that generally you concur with that understanding, because we want to depoliticize this and have it run in the most professional manner that we can do it without having, so we can maximize the rate of return. I mean, that's the goal, and we all agree with that. And so I think the term strong and weak just depends on what context you're using it in. But in terms of framework, the recommendation has to make this body as independent as possible. So really, that's what we're doing. But we're recognizing your political position and our system of government. And so we're trying to accommodate that as well.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would say that if we're going to implement CLA's recommendations, then CLA's recommendations was to have the treasurer the chairman of the IFC, and that was in the recommendations. And just draw that to your attention again.
Yep, yeah, we realize that. Okay, do you want to vote real quick before we go? Okay, we'll close discussion. Is there?
Move the amendment, Mr. Chairman.
I think we've already moved but we need to move the amendment. I think we've moved both bills.
Move the bill.
Okay, moved and seconded.
I move the amendment.
Second. Mr.
Been
Chairman,
moved and seconded. All those in favor of the amendment to House
Clark has
Bill
a question.
219?
I just have a question. What is the amendment that we're voting on? Oh, that one. Got it, this one.
Yeah, it's just.
Okay,
it's
thank
the-
you.
yeah. Adding the seventh member and making ex officio certain voters. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Back on the bill. Question being called. Roll call, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, you are voting on House Bill 219 as amended. Representative Kinner.
Aye.
Representative Larson. Aye. Representative Schwartz. Representative Simpson.
Aye.
Representative Stiff.
Aye. Aye.
Representative Walters.
Aye.
And Chairman Nicholas.
Aye. Okay. Let's go to House Bill 244. We've got 15 minutes.
Yes, we do.
Yes, it's right here.
This is the context here. So this is a substitute.
That's delicate.
And then.
Ryan, do we have Dave Groover on the screen? Has he joined us?
Chairman Nicholas, Mr. Groover is not an attendee, but I believe he is listening in.
Yeah, can we see if he can come in and maybe just walk us through this amendment if he's available?
I'll send him a note right away.
So while we're waiting for that, this is a substitute bill X, and I sent all of you kind of a history of emails where Ken Lay had kind of volunteered, he's on the IFC, to work with general concepts and that the Treasurer's Office, the executive branch, and me through the working through this committee by basically substantially shortening the 13-page bill that we have, turning it into basically a 5-page bill. And what's different about this is, number one, it has basically it sets out certain positions that the IFC has adopted. And so it's kind of a wherefore of why we're going to ask for a study and what that study says. And then it directs the IFC to perform a study to evaluate various components of the operations of the investment team. And so the prior bill basically created a council, required reorganization of everything. This says, no, let's step back a little bit. Let's have a much more broad and more encompassing study from the IFC and directs them to make any recommendations that they feel appropriate based upon their expertise. So that's kind of the 30,000-foot picture. I think if we can, we'll have the drafter, Mr. Groover, just kind of walk us through the bill as amended in the substitute bill. So please proceed, Dave.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, you want just a summary of the substitute bill, I take it?
Correct.
Overview is very simple. It just directs the Investment Funds Committee to conduct a study and report to the Capital Finance Investment Committee regarding alternative measures for managing investment of state funds. More specifically, on page 1, carrying over to page 2, the legislature makes findings that the governor's office, the treasurer's office, the Investment Funds Committee, and the legislature determines that a study should be undertaken for improving investment operations. It sets forth goals and objectives. First one is to bring Wyoming to the top tier in the field of investments. Second is to look at the legal and fiduciary responsibilities of the state. The state owns some funds, the state holds some funds as trustees.
And the objective is to identify what the state's proper role is as an oversight of investment funds. And then 3 is to develop a structure, management structure, to best achieve the goals, taking into account the duties of the states and the public duties of dealing with public monies to ensure accuracy, transparency, and timeliness in reporting. In conducting the study, the Investment Funds Committee is directed to review alternatives, and they're not limited to, but suggested alternatives is the public state corporation model that's been used by other states, I understand, and which the state did for the prison. You established a public corporation to build the penitentiary. There's also the chance for a state, just an investment council. That would be, I think, pretty close to what we have. And then a quasi-governmental entity. My way of thinking is that would mean something like an authority like you've done for the infrastructure authority, the energy authority and pipeline authority, in which you create it. But then it's, and you have some control over it, but pretty much it's hands off. It has its own separate board and it reports to the state. And again, those are just suggested alternatives. Then whatever they recommend as the alternative, the bill requires certain recommendations. It would be, the first thing is, what are the duties of all the state entities involved here? The State Loan Investment Board, the state treasurer, whatever management organization is recommended, and how they would interrelate to each other. B on page 4, line 4 is appropriate expense models. How much are you going to pay these people? What's it going to cost? How are you going to generate the revenue to fund it? C is, how do you develop this in a way that allows independent thought of the investment managers, but yet still comply with industry standards and fiduciary duties? And 4 would be, how would you look at this organization knowing that what's expected is that the state would be its only organizational client? Then the committee is to submit their report to the Capital Finance Committee by November 1st. There's appropriated $10,000 for the committee. Right now, the committee's only gets expenses for 4 members. The rest of those are state employees. The state treasurer's office, as in current law, would provide staffing for the committee. And then the executive department, which are involved with state investments, Office of State Lands, and the governor's office would assist the committee. And the LSO would assist the committee to the extent the committee requests and subject to the approval of Management Council. And that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions for Mr. Gerber? So one question I had, Dave, was on, you listed the alternatives, the corporation, a state, yeah, page 3, line 8 through 12. Public state of corporation, a state-owned investment management team, or state-created or quasi-governmental entity. But what if they come to the conclusion that for something different? Or you mentioned that these were just examples, but
It's, yeah. Page 3, lines 8 through 9, Mr. Chairman, it's including but not limited to.
that's
those.
what I want to see.
And
Kurt, I
whatever
know
they
you've
come
only
up
had
with, excuse me,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, whatever they come up with, even if it's something not listed here, then the rest of the page 3, line 14 on would apply to whatever the recommendation is.
Yeah. I see. Kurt, what's your, I realize you've only seen this 30 minutes ago, but, and obviously we'll welcome your comments on it after you have a chance to do a deep dive on it.
Yeah.
But what's your initial impression?
Well, I guess my initial impression is just to see hands of everybody in the committee that understands exactly what they're voting on. Or you got 1, 2, okay, 3, all right. Yeah, well, you guys evidently are a quicker read than I am, but I did come up with a few things. One thing generally in legislation, we essentially try to omit findings because they have no statutory, basically, effect. So, that's something that I think that is just a little cleanup. Then I think that, I think we should recognize on page 2, the work that the IFC committee has done in the past. I mean, these are a great group of individuals, and that they continue and would continue irrespective of this legislation or any other to assess options for improving the investment operations. That's their job. That's their duty. They do it, day in and day out. That's what we do. We try to make our investment organization the best in the world. That's our standard. We want to be very, very up at the top on everything. With a long way to go, but we've made some good progress. So I would say that, that the investment committee should undertake a study and continue to assess options for improving investment operations related to the state funds and to address best practices and comment on the following goals and objectives, because essentially they're a advisory committee, and so essentially what they do is comment and make recommendations. So I guess I would say in that thing we should recognize the due diligence that the investment funds committee has done and will continue to do in any regard. That's the first one.
Mr. Chairman.
And I understand that it's included, but not.
One second, Kurt.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Representative Stiff.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Treasurer, just so I understand it, on page 1, so line 16, the legislature finds there is a consensus among the state treasurer's office, the governor's office, the investment funds committee, and the legislature that, and then it goes on. So I just want to understand your comment. Are you saying you think that's like factually not true, that there is not a consensus about that? Or are you saying you just don't like findings in bills?
I'm saying they're superfluous, that they have no essential, it's a structure that has no effect in statutes. You can find anything, but at the end of the day, it's the actual statute that tells you what you should do. I think that, and I think you can, within the consensus, I think you can say that there's a willingness to cooperate, by utilizing the efforts of not necessarily a finding, but there's that we all want to cooperate, utilizing the investment funds committee, in the study and the comment and recommendation in these areas, but it's not necessarily a finding. The finding kind of, there are some things in here that I would more likely disagree on. The governor may have specifics in there that we may or may not disagree on. But I think that we need to recognize, in any case, we need to recognize the continued work of the IFC, and essentially, saying that this would be a continuation of the work that they do. And that's essentially their work. They do it every day. This is more or less kind of guiding them in these areas. Does that make sense, Representative Stiff? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Treasurer Myers, in your years in the legislature, it was very common practice, I think, then and still now, that we use findings, particularly as we do studies, because this is non-codified law. And the findings help give direction to the studies. Is that fair?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think the directions to the study really start on page 2, line 6, or slightly above that. I think that's, we're asking the IFC to do these things. And I guess that's what I would comment on that. And findings were always one of those things that I thought just wasted paper and time,
Okay, further comments?
Okay.
It's 2:00, so we got to go quick.
Okay, moving on, I would say that including but not limited to, there's that. All the things that are in here, and I think that Representative Nicholas, Mr. Chairman, that you recognize that the IFC necessarily doesn't have a great understanding of every one of our funds, what they're there for, the purpose for them originally, and they may come up with some answer that doesn't necessarily pertain to the way that the funds are statutorily derived and what we can do. And I know that there has been some talk that let's just do a unifund like we used to, get the best return that we can, but that doesn't really take into account the problems that you might have, which we got away from, of having things that were too volatile in the state agency pool. And so, I think that the saying that we're going to have this by November 2021 and get a good product with the understanding of, without that background understanding, I think is going to be problematic. So I think that we're going to have, you may have to have more time if you narrow the scope of this a little bit more, then I think you might be able to reach that. But understand that with the whole broad scope about how to do every fund the right way as we are looking at it today in today's structure. So you may very well get a different structure that comes out of it, and that's fine. That might be illuminating to us. But
And just to respond quickly to that, Kurt.
Yeah.
I do agree, and I had this discussion with Mr. Groover, that the first meeting or two of this, to get this thing launched, will probably necessitate having LSO present to the IFC the structure, if you will, and the confines of where all our various funds are, where they go, what the restrictions are on them, what the uses are of them, just so that the framework they develop is not just out of whole cloth, but it's manufactured to fit our system. And it may be ambitious, but I think that the IFC, at least in my discussions with them, are willing to take it on. And if they can't if they can only get halfway done by July or September or October, they'll tell us. And if they need more information, we'll be there to help them as much as possible. And presumably your office and your staff. So it's going to be a big lift.
Mr. Chairman, I think that maybe looking at this and maybe a subcommittee implementation and breaking it down, we could get more, because we've asked these guys and polled them about how long do you want your meetings to last? And they said, we want them short. We want action items, very little information. We want the information beforehand so we can study it. And so we can go right through and we can make decisions, bam, 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 bam. So
let's go to your last points, because we're doing the education.
The last point really, to me, is essentially a deal breaker. And it's on page 5, line 19. It says, and this talks about the governor's office, that the governor's office provide the report required by this act. And I'm sorry, this is an act about the treasurer's office. And if there's going to be a report out of this, that the treasurer's office should provide the report. And time again, we've had, I guess I'd say, cross currents on the role of the treasurer's office and the role of the executive branch. And essentially this is a deal breaker.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I read that, it says the treasurer's office will provide the report. The governor's office, OSLI, and et cetera, will help as the treasurer requests, essentially. If the treasurer needs help with the report, but it's the treasurer's office that's providing the report, is the way I read it, just with the help of those other entities.
Well,
That's-
if that's your
I'm-
intent, if staff can make sure that that's clear and put that in the front part of it.
So Dave,
You know-
real quickly, I mean, just tell us what it says.
Mr. Chairman, I think it says the committee provides the report, the governor's office and treasurer's office provides assistance to the committee as the committee requests in undertaking the study and preparing the report.
Okay.
And the LSO too, to the extent requested and management council approves.
Okay, what we're going to do is I don't think we'll adjourn. We'll take this up again either this evening or in the morning, just so because I want to get any other further comments. We want a clean version of it. If there's any grammatical changes, so we'll just wait until we have the version. And I've sent this off to the IFC members and those others participating, so we might get any comments back from them. So, okay, we'll adjourn.
Thank you, guys. And now that I know